Welcome to The Business That Pays with Adam Tolliver from Artisan Financial Strategies, where we mind the business that pays you. In this podcast, we empower successful families and business owners to make informed decisions about their finances through courageous conversations. Through his expertise as a practicing investment advisor representative with Eagle Strategies, LLC, a registered investment advisor, Adam teaches you how to create a wealth ecosystem by combining a practical technical framework with your personal, family, and community values. Join us for this journey where Adam normalizes sustainable wealth building and gives you the keys to make courageous, proactive financial decisions.
You've probably had one, a turning point in your life where something big happened and it changed the way you plan to move ahead. For successful business owners, the impact of these changes can be magnified. I'm Patrice Sikora with your host, Adam Tolliver. Now, Adam, you have some advice today for high earners who are grappling with a turning point. But first, could you please explain these triggering events?
For sure. So, Patrice, this is one of those things as a financial advisor, we are often meeting people in times of transition. So something has happened, some sort of inflection point in their life where they say, hey, maybe I should get some professional help. Now, I've got my biases, of course, as a professional, where ideally, if you're already working with someone and you've got a financial plan in place, it makes it a little bit easier to have a track to run on and know how to pivot. So you have sort of a if this, then that in your life. But nevertheless, that's not the way it always works. So there are times in our lives, in our careers, things happen with family, things happen with work or our businesses, where something is going to change the trajectory of what happens to us financially. And it may be a threat, it may be an opportunity, but we need to be able to have some semblance of knowing what to do next. And so these sort of triggering events, as I call them, are important to know how to manage when you run into them.
Well, immediately it comes to mind a career change, a promotion, hopefully. Yeah, a career change, promotion, hopefully a change in income. So what does that mean for your family? What does that mean for the trajectory of your career at your current place of occupation? Does it mean that you've changed jobs and have a significant bump that way? But it's going to change everything from your day-to-day finances. So our cash flow, how much we can spend, how much we can save, how much we can invest. But then it's also going to change sort of our long-term plans. What do we expect in the coming years in our career? Are there any changes in the way that we're compensated? So are things a little bit more complicated? Do we have long-term incentive plans and equity compensation as part of our planning all of a sudden? So a promotion, job change, those are major. Figuring out, are our benefits going to be impacted? Figuring out how much we're putting towards retirement. And sometimes what I run into is a lot of the people that we work with are getting to the point where they've started to max out their 401k. So they're putting in the full allowable amount. And then towards the end of the year, once they get to October, November, December, they realize they've got some extra money in their paycheck because they can't put any more into their 401k. And that's a brand new experience. So should I spend that money? Should I save that money? Those are a lot of the answers that we try to provide in a good financial plan. One of the notes here that you gave me, you talk about buying and selling real estate as well. I could see this having a big impact on the tax side.
Absolutely. And when you're buying and selling real estate, there are just certain things that you want to be mindful of. So one, is this a primary residence? How much is our home worth? And if it's not a primary residence, if it's a rental property or something like that, you are going to have different tax implications versus your primary residence, because there's a certain amount of your primary residence, if you've been living there for 2 of the last 5 years, that you can exclude from capital gains, right? And so you want to know, of course, if you're selling a house that's worth $500,000, whether or not you're going to have to pay taxes on that. And so buying and selling real estate is a very important one. And in general, whenever you're going to have some sort of event that will trigger a windfall of money, even when you're making good money, there's a difference between, hey, like every 2 weeks we make $15,000 or $20,000 versus, oh, we just got $150,000 or $250,000 or $300,000 wired into our bank account. And typically, if you don't have a plan in advance of that, one of two things happen. It either sits there and it does nothing, or unfortunately, people will blow through it. And so planning in advance of a windfall event is a very important thing to do.
We talked about the tax implications there for a minute, and you kind of touched on the investment strategies. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, and this kind of goes back to Patrice, if we already have a financial plan in place, it makes it a little bit easier to calibrate what we should be doing from an investment standpoint when we've got a lump sum of money, because so much of that is going to be driven by the priorities and objectives of the client at that time in their lives. So if we know that we have someone who is anticipating that they need to pay for or help support the education expenses for 2 or 3 children, maybe a windfall of money, our investment focus would be education planning. If we have a couple who knows that one or both would prefer to retire earlier than traditional retirement, then maybe we know that we accelerate our general nest egg and try to put some extra money towards that. So in advance, if we have some semblance of an idea of what the core objectives are, what do we want to focus on, what's most important, we can be planning to allocate those funds accordingly, and we're not so caught off guard or trying to figure it out after the fact.
Well, then you've got family, you've got income, marriage, divorce. That's part of life these days. How is that going to impact a high earner?
Yeah. So marriage and divorce, of course, when you are getting married, starting a new relationship, starting a new life together, the commingling of funds, the idea of it, how you do it, some of those things are honestly just things that people aren't very well versed at, because there's so many different ways that you can go about doing it. And if you haven't done it before, you might not have a strong opinion. Or conversely, if you have done it before, you may have a very strong opinion about how it needs to be done. And so coming in on the same page about how you want to approach finances is very important, but also starting to set some shared priorities. So if you've been single and you've had certain goals and objectives that you have for yourself, that's a lot simpler than getting aligned with another person about the life that you want to have together and how your finances support it. So it's often a good idea to start sort of on a clean slate together with a financial plan, because then you can go through a process that helps you identify, hey, I know what's important to me. I think I know what's important to you. Can we get on the same page and get aligned about it? And then when it comes to divorce, of course, this can be a very, very trying time for a lot of people mentally, emotionally, financially. And so there are a lot of things that we have to consider, everything from alimony to the splitting of property to child support or raising children, and eventually at some point maybe blended families. So there's a lot of additional planning that comes from the way families evolve over time. Of course, you know, we love a good, strong, healthy relationship that can last, but divorce is a thing that happens. And when it does, we do have a lot of planning to do. So that's one of those situations where you want to make sure that you've got a good advisory team on your side to help you navigate that. And ultimately that we've got positive outcomes for everyone. And especially when, you know, there are children and things like that involved.
Another huge turning point some people may experience is an inheritance or a big financial gift.
Yes. When you receive an inheritance, this is definitely one of those sudden wealth triggering type of events. And we've had an episode on sudden wealth and how that can impact people psychologically. And if we're talking about an inheritance, oftentimes you may receive or take in assets at a time where you're grieving. And it's a time of transition for you because you may have lost someone who's really important to you. And of course, that's part of life, but it can also impact your decision making. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to an inheritance, we do our best when planning with clients. You know, sometimes we'll be working with someone and they'll say, you know, I know my mom or my dad or, you know, grandparent has something for me, but I'm not sure what. And there's not always a lot of clarity on what to expect from that. So oftentimes we don't count that in the plan initially because it's a little bit too fuzzy. We just don't have the information.
You really can't. I think that's kind of, as you say, you don't have the information. You very well can't go and say, Grandma, how much are you putting aside for me?
and Patrice, and that is, we talked about recently about intergenerational wealth and planning and having conversations. And in some families, they are that transparent, but in a lot, it's kind of taboo, right? Mm-hmm. It's just kind of considered gauche and rude to even broach it. And also, people aren't really looking forward to when the people they care about pass away, right? And so when it does happen, a lot of what we have to consider are what type of assets were left behind. Are there any specific rules applied to how we can receive those assets, either based on the IRS or based on the estate plan that was put in place? And so, for instance, if we've received a qualified plan, so a 401k, an IRA, those types of things, then there are certain rules that we have to adhere to on how we can invest that money and what we have to do with it. So right now there's a 10-year spin down on qualified funds if you're not a spouse. So if you are, a son or daughter or grandchild or niece or nephew of someone who passes away and you're the beneficiary of their traditional IRA or their Roth IRA, you have 10 years to take that money from that vehicle. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to spend it, but you do have to take it out of there because our good friends at the IRS have been waiting to tax that money. Yeah. And so things like that, it's kind of the nuances of understanding the type of asset that you've received, what you can and can't do with it, and what you do have to do with it are really important. And it's not necessarily something that you want to try to navigate on your own without the help of someone who is a professional and can be more objective and help you kind of watch your blind spots for it.
Right. And you may get this inheritance. We're assuming it's an inheritance right now, at a time of your life when you are at your peak earning years.
Exactly. And that can be difficult if there is some sort of tax implication, or if you have to withdraw those funds and pay the taxes on them year by year. You want to do that in a way that's strategic and ultimately can still benefit you. But that is a big consideration. And this episode isn't necessarily about this, but it's one of the reasons that we have very strong opinions when planning with clients about their legacy, that we prefer to leave assets that are not qualified retirement plans, just because of the administrative duties that come with it. And of course, the tax implications.
One of the hugest turning points in someone's life is retirement. Talk to me about retirement planning.
Retirement planning is a really interesting time in people's lives. Ultimately, planning for retirement, we spend years and years and years telling clients they need to save and invest a certain amount, right? Like you're trying to get to a certain amount to where the assets that you've saved are enough in combination with some other things like Social Security income to support you for the rest of your life, whatever the rest of your life may look like. Mm-hmm. And then when they get into retirement, they have to flip a switch to start spending the money that they've been told they better be saving for the last 40, 45, 50 years. And it can be difficult for people to acclimate to spending their money down. And so managing that transition and having a solid plan for where your income is going to come from, how you support your lifestyle. And a lot of times this is just about framing, to be honest, Patrice. One of the classics that I've always loved that kind of gets people to think about it, like when you get into retirement, every day is Saturday.
Right.
And of course, we spend the most money on Saturdays. So that's kind of scary, right? And people's primary fears going into retirement are, am I going to run out of money? That's a very big one. They think about things like escalating healthcare costs. They think about things like, what am I leaving behind to the people I care about? And all of those things we want to carefully plan for. But one framework is when you get into retirement, you've got your go-go years, your slow-go years, and your no-go years. So in the go-go years, you're very active. You're kind of living out all of the fantasies that you've had when you've got the freedom and hopefully the means to be able to pursue the traveling and spending time with family and grandchildren and doing all of these sort of grand adventure type events. And hopefully that lasts for a good while you're in retirement. But eventually you move into the slow-go years. And the slow-go years may just be because of health and other restraints, you need to slow down a little bit and you can't be as active or be moving around as much. But that may also include those kind of escalating healthcare costs. And then the no-go years, of course, of kind of end of life planning. And so going into retirement with the mindset of recognizing like my life is going to evolve more in this next phase of life. How do we plan for it? And how do we kind of earmark our assets and our income along the way is a big part of what we do for our clients.
Do you find you have to push your clients to actually spend? I mean, if they, as you say, they've been saving all their life and now they're being told, you've got to spend this money. No, I can't spend the money. I just saved it.
Yes. That there's actually a lot of research done on that. And it reveals itself quite often in practice with clients. It is uncomfortable to think about the idea of losing your money, or really the risk here that people are fighting against is the idea of living too long, right? Which is a crazy thing to think about, but you don't want to outlive your resources.
Yeah.
And so there's this balance of I've got all of this money that I've been saving during my accumulation phase, and now you're telling me that I should be spending it, but I don't want to spend it all, of course. And I also want to be able to leave some behind for my kids or my grandkids. And so that type of planning can be difficult for clients to kind of wrap their head around. This is one of the reasons, and I'm always an advocate for this. In our office, we believe in leaving life insurance benefits because you can leave more for pennies on the dollar. So as opposed to making a decision between your $1 million qualified retirement plan and whether I should be spending this down or leaving it behind, we want you to spend your IRA money. We want you to actually take that money out, live your life, enjoy yourself, and maybe we shave off $50,000, $100,000 of that to leave behind $300,000 or $400,000 in life insurance benefits that are tax-free, and you don't have to worry about kind of the administrative issues and all of that, but you can leave behind more money for a smaller premium, and then you can actually enjoy the rest of your money. Which ultimately, that's what you should be doing. You've worked all your life, you've saved it, you've done your part, you've been disciplined, you've been steadfast in doing that. You should be able to actually enjoy your time and spend that money on your friends, your family, your grandkids. Enjoy it, please.
What a concept, right? Enjoy yourself.
Right. Imagine.
Imagine. Right. All right. You've really been quite successful in your career. You have gotten some stock options, equity compensation, and now what do you do with it? This can be a tricky situation.
Yeah, I saved equity compensation as sort of a bonus triggering event here, just because it's something that a lot of people kind of face at some point in their career when you've reached certain levels of success and you're working for typically larger companies, but a lot of people, if they're working for technology companies or things like that, you get equity compensation and you're like, okay, I got RSUs, I got PSUs, I got ISOs. What are all these things? What does this mean? Right? It is typically very good news once you start to receive some equity compensation for your career and for the trajectory that it can have, the impact that it can have on your financial plan. But you do have to handle it responsibly. And doing so is easier first if you have the context of a financial plan, so a larger plan. You're going to notice that theme. I'm going to say that over and over again. Planning is really about having sort of a centralized idea of the direction, the objectives, and the different components of your financial plan. But once we've got that in place, then we need to actually have a plan to track and monitor and manage your equity compensation and how it impacts that plan as an accelerant, because that's typically what it ends up being. You're going to experience either one or multiple sort of lump sum infusions of new money as part of your equity compensation plan over the course of several years. And it can impact kind of how you prioritize what to do with that money as it comes in. And so that's a lot of what we do, is sort of this multi-year planning of saying, over the next 4 or 5 years, we could realistically have $300,000 to $400,000 to $500,000 in additional compensation coming through equity grants. How do we manage that? What happens if I leave my job early before some of my equity compensation vest. Should I be using that as an opportunity to leverage for negotiation in my new job? How do I make decisions around when to exercise stock options? How do I monitor that value? A lot of those decisions are what we want to help people make. And it's much, much easier if we can get in and start to plan in advance so we can look at a multi-year strategy and the implications on our investments, on our retirement, on our taxes. And in some cases, for some people who are really doing well and moving up, say to the C-suite, we may have impacts on the estate plan as well. So we want to be very mindful of that with equity compensation.
So the bottom line sounds to me like start planning as early as possible. Even if you haven't reached that level yet, you very well could, and you should plan ahead.
Absolutely. Plan in advance. It makes it that much easier because then we are pivoting or iterating as opposed to starting from scratch. And ultimately, that gives us the best sort of posture of strength and optionality is if we're not starting from scratch and we don't have sort of a short timeline to make decisions on. So that's a big part of it is planning in advance. It's why I encourage everyone who is able to be looking for a strong relationship with an advisor that they believe in and has a process that can help them succeed.
And how can listeners reach you, Adam?
Yes, you can reach me at workingwithadam.com.
Which is always so simple. I love it. Workingwithadam.com. There you go.
Absolutely.
All right, listeners, goals and dreams, learn more about reaching yours. Follow this podcast for new shows, share with others, and of course, let Adam know what you're thinking. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for listening to Business That Pays. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of the Artisan Financial Strategies or Eagle Strategies, LLC, a registered investment advisor. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial professional provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment strategies.
Adam Tolliver, registered representative offering securities through NY Life Securities, LLC, member FINRA SIPC, a licensed insurance agency. 1125 Cambridge Square, Suite C, Alpharetta, Georgia, 30009, 404-210-9311. Financial advisor offering investment advisory services through Eagle Strategies, LLC, a registered investment advisor. NY Life Securities, LLC, and Eagle Strategies, LLC are New York Life companies. Artisan Financial Strategies, LLC is not owned or operated by NY Life Securities, LLC, or its affiliates. Neither Artisan Financial Strategies, LLC, nor its advisors provide tax, legal, or accounting advice.